Welcome to the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago's first online conference in collaboration with the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. As you know, the theme of our conference is the future of online learning quality, best practices in artificial intelligence and competency-based credentialing.
So at this session, we have professional statutory and regulatory bodies, those that are involved in regulating professions. We have two presenters for this afternoon's roundtable, and our final roundtable. The first is Dr. Jane Towers-Clark, who's the head of academic partnerships of the Association of Certified Chartered Accountants. And secondly, we have Mr. Jainarine Bansee, who's the president of the Association of Professional Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago.
I'm delighted to be here today representing ACCA at the ACTT conference on artificial intelligence and competency credentialing. So the focus of my presentation is to highlight the journey we've been on at ACCA to support our students by moving to remote invigilation of exams and how artificial intelligence is used within this form of assessment practice. And it's been really interesting listening to the conversations earlier going on. If I could have the next slide, please. In terms of what I'm looking to cover today, I'll cover very briefly a background on ACCA, but then I want to look at ACCA's technology journey, including our use of remote invigilation and our use of artificial intelligence. Next slide, please. So ACCA is the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. We've got a global community of 227,000 members and 544,000 students based in 176 countries globally. Our ACCA qualification is made up of three elements. So it's made up of the exams, it's made up of the ethics, and it's made up of the experience. And the students gain the exams elements of their qualification, going through a series of exams known as applied knowledge, applied skills, and strategic professional exams. We work with about 348 approved learning providers to better support student learning. And the students take the exams. And I think it's probably worth saying that when students take the exams, it does provide us with data on the student population, and we're in the early stages of developing how we might use machine learning to analyse the data in order to support student learning. Not one for today, but maybe one for future. So as all of us have mentioned, COVID-19 has hit all of the countries that we have our students taking exams in, and that really has generated significant challenges for our students in order for them to be able to access exams and be able to move rapidly through their route of getting to qualification. What it has meant for us is that we've had to really change the way we were working and move towards remote invigilation for these high-stake exams. Next slide, please. So we've been exploring remote invigilation for some time, and while the technology had improved enormously over the years before COVID-19, we were monitoring its future use rather than actively looking at to change our delivery. So most of our exams up until there would have been incentive-based exams, as you would expect. We've been adopting technology for our exams for a number of years, and so we've been transitioning from paper-based exams to computer-based exams to better test the application of knowledge. So, if students are doing spreadsheets in the workplace, you want to be testing them and testing their application of that and their skill of that. Before the pandemic, that rollout had been our focus. However, with the COVID-19 pandemic, that all changed, and we really felt the first impact of the pandemic when our students in China went into lockdown in February, and we had to cancel all our local centre exams in March. So very distressing for students who'd been studying towards a session, and they had to postpone to the next session. Later in March, we then had countries across Europe who went into lockdown, and we then realised that our June exam sessions, we run them every quarter, were at risk. So it was sort of late March that we escalated our investigations into remote invigilation to explore whether this could be an option for ACCA students for them to be able to take their exams effectively at home. Next slide, please. So ACCA, as I say, had started thinking about remote proctoring as a possibility for things like special centres in 2019. So we were a little bit ahead of the game when COVID-19 struck. And when we started looking at what the options are in February and March, we commissioned a report from an external consultancy to really help us understand the external environment. Therefore, it meant that in March, when COVID-19 really struck, we were able to respond to the increasing isolation and begin the journey of implementing the ability for students who'd wish to take their exams at home. And I still find it incredible, the speed with which we were able to move. So by the time we got into July, we were able to take a small scale delivery of remotely invigilated exams. So for about 2,000 students across 7 exams and across around 50 markets. After that initial rollout, we conducted research and analysis of our findings, both of the student experience, so that we could look at the findings from there, as well as analysing whether there'd been any significant impact in the mode of delivery on student performance, because we wanted to make sure that there was no impact from the mode of delivery, from moving to these in-centre exams to these remotely invigilated exams on our students, and that we could therefore progress to a wider rollout. So we were satisfied ourselves that this was the case, and then we ran a much larger remotely invigilated session in September with around 31,000 students having now sat remotely invigilated exams. We're working through learnings at the moment to really improve the student experience, looking to our December session, where we'll be offering remotely invigilated exams in about 54 markets. If I could have the next slide, please. So I want to tell you a little bit about the approach to the remote invigilation that we took. There are several levels of remote invigilation, and as all ACCA exams are considered to be high-stake exams because they're professional exams, we have very much chosen to go with the most rigorous methodology, which uses both artificial intelligence and human invigilators, and that's called preventative remote invigilation. So we use live invigilators to monitor students taking their exams, and the student logs onto the exam. There are several checks performed, such as demonstrating that the room is empty, no materials around that could facilitate the cheating. The exam software locks the student's computer to ensure they can't access any materials during the exam, and the student and their exam screen are then monitored throughout the exam, and they've got to keep their webcam on, and they've got to keep their microphone on for the duration of the exam. If I could move on, please, to the next slide. I think it's worth talking about our partners in this, so that you sort of can see how this side works. So for our on-demand exams, ACCA works with Proctoring, who provide the invigilation, and we use our own delivery platform, ISS, to deliver the exams at home in the same way that they would be delivered as computer-based exams. For our session-based remote invigilation, we piloted in July. We use Pearson VUE for both exam delivery and their OnView software. And of course, as you can probably imagine, with the volumes that we're talking about of students, one of our key challenges is logistics. So we've got to run thousands of exams in scheduled windows. So to give us flexibility to suit our model of test security for our exams, in September, we used British Council invigilators with Pearson VUE software, and that enabled us to scale up our invigilators when we needed to, up to the kind of volumes we're talking about. If I could go to the next slide, please. So biometrics and artificial intelligence, a really important area of discussion in remote invigilation. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. So as I should say that students can opt out of the process that uses biometrics when there's a check-in. They have the ability to do that when they accept the terms and conditions. And if they do opt out, they're then checked into the exam in a normal way using a live invigilator. I think it's really important at this point to talk about choice and re-emphasise the fact that offering choice in all of this is really important aspect of what's being offered. You will have seen, I'm sure, in our articles in the press about organisations that have been threatened with legal action for employing invigilation approaches that invade people's privacy. And I think the key point here is that these organisations perhaps haven't offered the students a choice as to whether they sit their final exams by this method or defer their exam until later and, let's say, take it in a normal way. We've made it really clear that we offer this as an additional service to students so they can opt for it if they want to progress with their exams and are comfortable with the approach. And I do apologise for barking in the background. To give a bit of background about the system we use, biometrics are used to prevent impersonation and artificial intelligence to improve the check-in process. The system we use uses Adimia. That's the tool that you will have seen used for passport scanning at airports. It uses advanced technology and it checks the student is showing a valid government ID, and that's the artificial intelligence side. So does the face match the student sat in front of the screen with the government ID used? That's the biometrics. And then does the name match with the government ID? And that is what's on the student registration form, and that's the artificial intelligence side again. Although the technology is very highly reliable, if the software does pick up any issues, the check-in is then referred to the person, to a person to do further checks. If I could go to the next slide, please. Learning from research findings, and we did quite a lot of research into this, and I was certainly involved in that element and sat in all sorts of webinars. We do combine live proctoring and biometrics-based proctoring, and that really enhances the integrity in our exams. And I've just got on the screen here for your interest, this is typically what it would look like for an invigilator with a number of student screens for them to monitor at any one time. If I could go to the next slide, please. So biometrics, one part of the solution, and artificial intelligence. As I mentioned earlier, privacy and GDPR compliance here are absolutely essential. So we had to ensure both the ACCA and our partners are compliant in all markets where we offer exams. So our data privacy and our GDPR teams work closely involved in the design and the supplier selection, making sure that we're in compliance with all of these elements at all stages. So technology has come a really long way, and the use of technology using artificial intelligence in this way has just meant that thousands of our students have been able to progress through their student journey closer to ACCA membership and to achieving their dreams.
Right, so welcome to all. My name is Jainarine Bansee. I'm currently the president of APET and a development engineer at UE. Since I am just away from lunch, the virtual lunch, I will try to cover it in under 10 minutes. So the agenda is on 3 points: engineering membership, micro-credentialing, and post-membership. So we at the Association for Engineering Membership, you can enter as a student while you are pursuing your degree and move up to associate member after the completion of your degree, and subsequently after 4 years, you can proceed to a member. And then as you gain additional experience and competence, you move on to senior member and fellow. At other associations, it can be to chartered status. So I will spend 2 minutes on associate member and member. The associate member, you need to possess a degree from a university or some equivalent qualification, which is recognized. The key there, it must be recognized by the association. Whereas a member, in addition to the qualification which was indicated, it consists of practice, that's where the 4 years come into play, and your experience, so that you can move up from an associate member to a member. There's the alternative route for a mature person who may not necessarily possess all the qualification, but that person is competent and has been performing the duties for about 15 years. That is afforded to individuals who are 40 years and above. So with respect to the qualification, here we are saying you must possess an undergrad degree in engineering, which is usually 3 to 4 years a course of study. But the awarding institution tend to require that 2/3 of such program be completed at their institution. I am referring to our local culture and regional. So the applicability of micro-credential for associate membership may not necessarily exist for the undergrad, because they tend to, the micro-credential tends to be narrow in range than the traditional qualification, because you are pursuing a degree which can be up to 3 or 4 years and goes into the deeper principles. Nano degrees is the same as micro-credentials. It's demonstrate knowledge and competence in a given subject area, which may be modular based. For instance, one of the previous presenters indicated in terms of erecting a scaffolding. However, post-membership, that is mean as you gain additional experience, it is most applicable. We have advances in science and information technology, consumer rights legislation, global issues. So as a proactive workforce, all right, you need to pursue those things. And as job merge and cross-functional responsibility, you are requiring new competencies. It's a flexible job market there. The job you had 30 years ago may not exist today. and you are preparing yourself in a proactive workforce for tomorrow. And tomorrow, the goalposts always keep changing. Career, you may change. So as a firm believer in continuous learning through lifelong learning, you have to plan your pathway. And one of the pathways is through doing additional courses, additional programs as the job market change. On the association side, as the roadmap would have shown, on your pathway to upgrade into fellow and even chartered engineering through IMECI, there's this continuous professional development, and you can do that through MicroCredentialing. But it's a requirement for all members of APET and registered engineers in our local setting. Most important aspect is the knowledge or the skills which is acquired, not necessarily a piece of paper, but it is the evidence we need. In our setting, for professional development units, examined CPDU, it's 1 PPDU per hour, whereas for only attendance, it is 1 for every 2 hours. So I guess based on today's exercise, we hit about 6 hours, I may get 3 PDUs. Post-membership. What we are saying, the Engineering Profession Act of TNT makes provision for the registration of engineers. However, there is no legal requirement that one must be registered to practice in engineering in TNT. But in order to be registered, the applicant degree must be recognized and accredited. In our case, we have ACTT. You must also have 4 years of engineering experience after graduation, subsequent to you graduating. You must also have further learning, not limited to only a recognized master's degree, but you can have accumulation of academic knowledge with evidence of examination, which must be evidenced by examination in terms of micro-credentials. That's where it comes in. Accumulation, but the key there is evidence of examination. You must also show the application of principles. That's where the competence, and that goes straight to our theme of our conference when we talk about micro-credentialing and competence. So the standards exist there, the quality is built in into the examination process, but it must be recognized and accredited. For your consideration, in terms of the stakeholders' recognition, it must be recognized by the academics, and here we are talking about in terms of portability from one institution to the other. The employers must recognize it. It must not only be internal within an organization where you have a certificate of participation, internal training, but it must be portable from one employer to the other in terms of, as we refer to it, tax qualification. Over the last, from somewhere in March, I would have been exposed at UEM, My Learning, BBC. We have My Teams, webinar, Zoom. What am I doing with all those skill sets? Can I accumulate it and have something, be it limited as certificate, as the case may be? It must also be recognized by the professional association and institution. So it's not only certain providers, it must be, as the last point mentioned there, service providers of further learning. We must have some sort of institution body which approves that. That means the providers. And in terms of the micro-credential, we as our association scrutinize it in order to look at the content. But when individuals and associations are providing these further rating, who examine the contents? I had indicated in an earlier slide in terms of 1 PDU per hour, but it is a standard across the industry, the providers. And what about the mode of delivery? We have online and blended. Where are the standards? Where are the checks? Where are the controls? So those were my brief consideration. I did not specifically put it as a recommendation, but it should be considered. Somebody, I did not refer to it as being ACCT, but some institution. It can be a group which can be encompasses the academics, the employers, and the professional organization. I know they probably kept the best for last, but I will thank you all. I think I would have attained my under 10 minutes. And to give compliments to ATC, it is fitting for this. and we had global exposure. We had knowledge coming in from a global team of presenters. Also in our local setting, the industries. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bansee. And I'd ask you to remain there and ask Dr. Towers-Clarke to join us as well. This is where we get to the question and answers segment. And so I have two questions posed for each of the panelists. And what I'd like to do is ask the questions to Mr. Bansee first, and then ask the last questions to Dr. Towers-Clarke. The first question, Mr. Bansee, is: are there any fully online micro-credentials available for engineering for all the engineering membership levels by APET?
All right, APET is for all the engineers, all the discipline, and predominantly chemical, civil, electrical, right? We are the body where you join an association. There is an extension which we call BOYET, which is Board of Engineers in Trinidad and Tobago, which awards you that registration aspect of it. But there is nothing online in terms of you can go and do a degree online and send in that application to APET. It must be scrutinized, and we have a team of experienced professionals and professors who will go through each applicant and see, based on the guidelines which is set forth, if to recognize that as equivalent to a degree. Whereas in the state system, they have the National Technological University, where you have multiple universities, and you can go into various universities and do a segment of it. But that is the controlling body. In our situation here, we cannot go into our local providers there and do a 6 months here or 3 modules on one. Because as I indicated earlier, they generally require at least 2/3 of your degree to be completed by the awarding institution. But the online aspect, what you are referring to, is more for the professional development aspect.
Right, and the other part of that, sorry, the other part of that question is: do you see a role for a body like the Engineering Institute at the University of the West Indies or other for assisting or supporting APET and other such professional bodies like the Board of Engineering to ensure that engineers are certified on a continuous basis?
Well, the Act is there, the Act of 1985, it makes it mandatory that all engineers to practice must be registered. And then the CPDUs comes into effect that you maintain by completing. Right now we have it as 10 units for the year. It's a rolling average, so the previous year it could be 12 and this year 8, right? But if the Act is enacted and make sure that it is mandatory for engineers to register in order therefore to practice. And a typical example is if you are sending out government contracts for people to come in, your crew, your staff should be registered engineers before you even get in to submit your bid. That way we are ensuring that you are having competent engineers to execute the work, and there may be less issues and challenges thereafter. But the Act directly, if it is the Engineering Institute, they can be one of the stakeholders in terms of contributing and formalizing it as other service providers. Bearing in mind, the Engineering Institute also provides these short courses.
Thank you. The last question to you is: do you see that there being value for having all professional standards bodies like APET in Trinidad and Tobago receive some sort of form of partner validations or having joint accreditation for recognition of micro-credentials in engineering?
You mean the association, or you mean the association issuing that certification?
The association partnering with an accrediting body to ensure having some sort of validation of the programs that are offered, including micro-credentials.
As a team approach, as one of the stakeholders, we have no objection in being part of that. So it will have standardization. But I meant like that, 2 external service providers give a particular course, and there's standardization across the service providers. So when they submit their micro-credential to the association or the registering body, it is a sort of standard. I know you cannot have it at a global because it will look at everybody is providing the same thing, but in terms of counting your points.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Bansee, for answering those questions. And now to Dr. Jane Towers-Clark. I just have 3 related questions for you. You mentioned the use of artificial intelligence in terms of your remote invigilation of examinations processes. And so one of the questions that I have for you is, have you had any challenges with implementing your model? And if so, what are they? And how have you overcome them?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you. I mean, that's a really interesting question. I think there will always be challenges if you're implementing something like remote invigilation, and the key challenge is going to be technical issues. So yeah, there have been challenges without doubt. There are often challenges with the student, you know, with their having the right technical stuff in front of them. From our side, we're very much trying to support them. So that could be through improved communications to the student, explaining what kind of software they need and all those sorts of things, what the computer needs to have in advance, support during the process, and making sure the students are really ready to take the exams. So yeah, it's very much a learning process. Definitely lots of improvements that can be made, but I think probably absolutely essential for what we've seen, that we need to move forward in this direction. Yeah.
Good. And the other question is, will ACCA be moving completely to remote invigilation for all of its exams? And have you incorporated student feedback to assist you in moving forward with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really important to us is that we still offer choice. So where we have no choice to be able to do it, and there are countries like ourselves at the moment who are completely locked down, then the choice is either to do the exam later when it becomes possible to sit in a centre, or to do it as remote invigilation. But going forward, we'd be very much looking to maintain the choice for students, because some students find it really, really difficult to sit remotely invigilated exams. It may be the environment they're in. It may be very difficult for them to find the space that they need for it to be secure and those sorts of things. So very much looking forward, we'd be looking to have the choice for students, and that's the feedback we've had from students, is to have that choice maintained wherever possible.
Good. Well, I want to thank you also, Dr. Towers-Clark, for joining us this afternoon, and for your organization's support to ACTT for partnering with us on this conference. Thank you very much.